Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Black Advancement. My name is Ajaman Asante Goodman. I'm your host / moderator for the day. Along with me, I also have Jeremy Stiles and Greg Goodman. Possibly some other people will join. If they do, cool. If they don't, we got enough, baby. We got enough. So anyway, again, welcome to the Black Advancement. Before we get into it, we'll talk about what the Black Advancement is all about. Black Advancement Incorporated is a nonprofit organization that looks to combat problems within the Black community through action and dialogue. Before we get into the topic today, let me get into the front street. Black people have been subjugated to the very worst that America has had to offer since the beginning of our arrival in the Western world with European settlers. Everything has been done to either completely impede the progress of Black people gaining the rights of normal citizenship, or purposefully undercut after any kind of legislation was rendered in favor of us gaining basic rights that everyone was supposed to have since inception. This continuous struggle of forcing America to recognize the humanity of Black people continues even to this day. However, there have been some victories along the way to help people, to help even out the miscarriages of equality throughout the years, as shown in programs designed to assist Black people into getting higher education or an opportunity at employment, i.e. affirmative action. Yet this program has come under fire by not only white Americans, but even some black ones as well, who feel this type of assistance is an insult opposed to a hand up. And like before, has recently been challenged legislatively to again derail Black people in America from our steady march towards full citizenry. The opposition of even some Black people begs for the question to be asked on whether the installation of affirmative action is helping in the destruction of the Black community. And with that, I will go into the first question, which is, do you believe that Black people should receive special accommodations, i.e. affirmative action, for things such as college admission and or employment opportunities? Why or why not? And just because he has seniority, I'm gonna start with Greg.
Well, of course you are. I would say definitely these things are necessary. Just based on the past history the Blacks have had in this country, we've been held back in this country longer than we've been so-called equal. So if this is what it takes to even out the to help even out the balance of opportunities for Blacks and whites, then it definitely needs to happen. You know, because of all the I don't know how many millions upon possibly billions of dollars that Blacks have been rooked out of throughout the history of this country, the amount of opportunities that have been lost in this country just simply based on the color of your skin. If this is the beginning of a form of an apology or a help out, then it definitely needs to work out it works out best for the country as a whole. You know, the only problem that I do have with affirmative action is with most things that happen with Black programs that are established for Blacks, we still end up getting cut out of it somewhat. Like affirmative action, I think Blacks are the second or third on that list of affirmative action now. Affirmative action actually helps out white women more than anyone in this country at this point. So for something that was designed specifically for us that we fought for, and they've still found a way to cheat us out of it. But is it needed? Yes. Is it necessary? Absolutely. Because nepotism exists in this country. There's always a hookup, and if you don't have anyone in the position to get you in there to begin with, then there has to be something to allow to help you, you know, to get an actual opportunity. Now, I'm not saying that it should be used like people think it's being used. A lot of white people think it's just some random Black dude that gets an opportunity. They still have most Blacks, well, not most, all the Blacks that end up getting help through affirmative action programs and things like that have all the qualifications, and they have all the knowledge for the position. But because they're Black, in the past, they would never have an opportunity to even get in the door. Now this is an opportunity for them to get in the door. So it's not like they're getting some guy who's not qualified for the job in these positions, but people are looking at it and selling it as if that's what's going on. So I think that's what the real problem, part of the problem is with people having a problem with affirmative action, that, and the fact that some people, well, white people, feel it's not fair for a Black person to get a job just based on the Blackness. You know what I'm saying? Just based on Black. However, I don't remember anyone complaining about Black people not getting jobs just based on Black. So to me, it's a necessary thing, and if it's helping to balance out and people are qualified to do it, then that's what it is.
Jeremy.
Yeah. So
I can,
you already know. No, I don't think that Black people should get special accommodations, should get affirmative action. It's not so much a thing of, there's no way we can deny that Black Americans have experienced discrimination. And that's an understatement. I mean, it's been extreme discrimination in this country. It has an awful racial history. Nevertheless, I don't think that the solution can be, what is affirmative action? So I have to challenge what Greg said towards the end. I respect a lot of what you said, but towards the end, affirmative action actually does allow Black folks, brown folks to get into certain institutions such as elite colleges with, on average, lower SAT scores, lower GPAs. I don't think that's actually a solution for us to lower the standard in order for us to be able to attend these type of colleges. In fact, I think it's kind of insulting, and it adds to the perception of others that you're not going, that the only reason you got in was because of your race, was because of affirmative action. I think it would benefit us a lot better to only allow those into these institutions that actually were up to par with everybody else. One of the things affirmative action does is it kind of masks the fact that so many of us are being underserved at the high school, middle school, elementary level, that so many of us aren't getting the grades that will allow us into some of these institutions. Just allowing someone to get in with a lower score is not a solution. I don't think it's even good for the psyche of a lot of Black Americans, honestly. Let's see what else. Hey, or do you believe that Black people should?
I can reread.
Jeremy, can I challenge you for a second?
Real quick, let me just add this other point. If we're looking, I don't think that's saying that, well, there was a time when Black people weren't able to get into certain institutions because they were Black. Now we should be allowed to get in simply because we're Black as the solution. Then we're still emphasizing race. We still have racial essentialism. Then we should be trying to get away from that. I agree with the whole idea of at least striving for a meritocracy. Yes, there's people that have advantages, and it's not completely perfect, but saying that we're going to use race as a way for people to allow us to get into these institutions is a solution. I just don't agree with that.
And joining us is Antoine Smallwood. I'll reread the question for you, Antoine, and then I'll let you go, okay?
Sure thing.
Indeed. Do you believe that Black people should receive special accommodations, i.e. affirmative action, for things such as college admission and or employment opportunities? Why or why not?
Excellent question. And I think that the answer is, it is well written. I think that the answer is yes. I think that affirmative action was created for individuals who come from underrepresented groups for a reason, right? So a lot of those opportunities have lacked historically in the last, 100 plus years, but if you want to get deep into it, let's talk about the last 50 to 60 years, right? Which is generally within our lifetime. You're talking about the perspective of people who have always been allowed to kind of go and permeate the space and thus play offense versus folks who are being disallowed to have those same opportunities. So one of the things I want to say off bat is not about somebody who has lower grades or somebody who is underachieving, because you have people who are overachieving that are not seeing those same opportunities. Whether you're talking about corporate workplace, whether you're talking about in schools, whether you're talking about acceptance rates, what one considers a top tier university, whether it's like a Harvard or if you're talking about something that's an Iowa State University, it does not matter. Affirmative action is there to kind of help foster the growth of folks who come from underserved communities, because they're not traditionally being allowed in those spaces. So I think that it's something that, if used properly, is wonderful. I think that at this point it has not been, because a lot of, how do I want to phrase this here? There are statistics out there that support the fact that white women, I believe, have been the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. So Black and brown people, who the system was allegedly designed for, have been the least successful with affirmative action. And that's problematic for a number of reasons. So let's talk about university level, or let's talk about your corporate workplace, or anything that you do, even an entrepreneurial pursuit, right? At the apex of each of those industries, they all look the same ethnically. So we're talking about ethnic diversity is usually white male that is at the top of those fields. Thus, when you talk about hiring, when you talk about who's leading those factions, even if you want to get down to the grid of it, you can go to your local McDonald's up here in the Bronx, right? An area where there is nobody that looks like that manager there. Why are they bringing a manager in from Long Island to come manage that store? Why would they not bring in a manager that looks like the people who are there, representative of the community? So affirmative action goes a long way beyond, just handing somebody something. I think that's a misrepresentation of what it actually is and what it's designed to do. Another beneficiary of those programs, and why I think that, again, they need to be put in place, however, it needs to serve the communities it's made to serve, is the fact that corporations benefit from it heavily, right? Nobody ever talks about the money that a lot of companies get to create these programs. Yet when you go to their boardrooms, when you go to their entire core teams from an organizational standpoint, is largely, white male or white female. And then here and there, you may see a person of color. Ethnic diversity is lacking in a lot of areas. And to speak to Jeremy's point about it being damaging, it is for some people. So you hear this term going around now called imposter syndrome or whatever like that. People, I get what they're saying, but it's almost like it was designed to work that way. Like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't belong here. You absolutely do belong there. If the average individual knew what they had to do, forget from A to Z, and all the obstacles that were there that they didn't place themselves, these were obstacles that were placed in the way, intending for that individual not to succeed, or an individual's group of people not to succeed, their head would explode. It's problematic. And there are people who do that with a straight face that are like, oh, we're still about this diversity thing. Everybody right now, what's the popular phrase you've heard in the last year and a half? DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everybody speaks those words, but very few are actually willing to live that. And if you look at the top half of their organizations, they're not living it. If you look through the middle half of the organization, they're not living it. Now, if you go down to the mailroom, they may be living it a little bit. You go down to security, they're damn sure living it. You know what I'm saying? That's a problem. When you talk about getting into school, let's talk about education for a minute. Education is as important as what you plan to do with it, right? So some people just want to go to school just for the sake of saying, you know what, they want to take their next step in life. Why is it that you can take a person that is not from an underrepresented group? They can have a GPA that Jeremy may have a 4.6, and he'll struggle to still get into that same university. That individual comes with maybe a 1.9, and they'll get in. They'll get in every single time. There's statistics that support that type of information. So for me, just to kind of start it off, I do agree that it should be in place. I think that is misrepresented largely on a massive scale what it actually is. And I think we need to have better education surrounding what affirmative action was designed to be versus what it's turned out to be currently.
I respond.
Hold on, and to add to that, the 6%, you were just I think the point you were making is that people will feel like you don't belong there and everything else, and you may have a little. To be honest, I don't care. I don't care if they don't think I belong there, and I don't care if it's considered a hookup, because when they had those same opportunities, they didn't care either. They didn't care what we thought about it. They gave zero damns. So I'm the same way. I'm just the same as you. And when I get in there, maybe I'm not as qualified or whatever. If that may be the case, there's been plenty of white dudes that have been underqualified that have gotten the same opportunities. Henceforth, I don't care what they think. I'd much rather be in there eating than outside starving, no matter how I got in there.
And I agree with that, because here's why. And I'm sorry, I'd have to say this real quick, because what they'll do is move the goalposts on that. To Greg's point, let's say if a person isn't quite as qualified and they get in, right? So let's say that person, a black person or whatever, gets in there and they don't quite have all the full credentials. How can you expect them to have the credentials? Because at company A, they're not hiring them. Company B, they're not hiring them. You go damn near to Z, nobody at that level is being hired as a person from an underrepresented group. So how would they ever have grown those skills? Meanwhile, the person who's in those roles did not have those skills and were brought in at the same level that Greg is kind of describing here. So, I mean, that for me, it is what it is.
Antoine with the most deaf. If I had ID, I wouldn't need ID. Go ahead, let Jeremy go, Greg. Let Jeremy go.
Huh? No, I'm not about to let him go. I'm saying we're not trying to pile up on Jeremy. I understand where he's coming from, and I understand what he's trying to, what he's saying. What I'm saying is he's making some fair points about this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't care what they think. That's all I'm saying. But I get where he's coming from with his argument. So it's not a diss. I understand where he's coming from. Yeah. I get what he's trying to say.
For sure.
Everything is a discussion here. This is good stuff. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, so
wait a second. I got something to say. I'm just playing.
Yeah. Go ahead. You got somebody else coming onto the call too.
Hold on a second. Let me get this person on. Go ahead.
I think first of all, it's important to be honest about what is affirmative action. So Antoine, you gave the example of people having very high scores and that they get in and so on and so forth. Those people don't need affirmative action. Affirmative action actually is for considering race in order to get into. I'm focusing more on the schools. Honestly speaking, I don't know so much about what's happening in the corporate level, and how that's.
We can talk about schools.
Hurting people, but with the schools. The only reason that affirmative action is even needed today, instead of focusing on what the purpose was before, even though I think it was still similar, is because if you didn't consider the race or take a holistic approach, as they call it, then the student body wouldn't look as quote unquote diverse. If they just took people just based off of their scores, so on and so forth, you wouldn't see as many of us. As far as if we don't care what other people think, then we shouldn't even care about white women getting in more or whatever other groups are getting in more due to affirmative action as well. Now, personally, I'm saying I'm against affirmative action, period. I didn't say I'm against affirmative action just for Black people. I think it should just be, we should eliminate this idea of we're going to look to bring people in based off of race. That's what affirmative action is to me. I need someone to explain why we would even use examples of people that would get into the school anyway when trying to defend affirmative action.
Although Jeremy's
so here's a question, Jeremy.
Hold on. Although Jeremy's point brings me to this question, it's not directed directly at Jeremy. Do you believe that hiring practices as of now are fair in terms of for everybody to get an equal opportunity? We can just go one at a time around if you want. Greg, do you believe they're fair?
No. Okay. No, there's no such. Listen,
I don't need the whole.
No such thing as fair in this country. It's about who you know. For the most part, qualifications do play a part in it, but everything is about access and who you know and who's going to help you out. And like I said, when it comes to people getting in just based on their color, I don't care, because people get put in just based on my father went here. You know what I'm saying? And their scores are lower. But nobody's saying that those guys shouldn't be in school. That's all I'm saying. Nobody,
but people do
nobody's
say that.
saying,
That's why we know about it.
yeah, but it's not as
But it's
vicious.
still wrong. It's still, but that's
Really,
wrong too. Just because the one thing is wrong is happening doesn't mean that, okay, we'll do the other thing that's wrong. But for us, instead of focusing so much on what some other people are doing, how about for us, does it really benefit
but
us as a group? There's a lot. Well,
Jeremy, I wanted to ask you a
hold on,
question. Hold on, Greg. I want to ask you a question.
Here's
I want to ask you a question. Check
let me
this
get
out.
out of the way real quick. Here's the point that I'm trying to make about that. It's vicious towards Black people. Nobody's vicious towards rich kids getting themselves bought into school. And even if they are, it's not nearly as loud as it is towards us, based on, we can even call it based on the same thing, someone getting a hookup. But nobody is really viciously attacking white dudes getting hookups like they're viciously attacking Black dudes. Why is it unfair when we get a so-called hookup and not unfair when they get a hookup? That's the point I'm trying to make. Either way, there's hookups being going all over the place. We want in on the hookup. That's all.
do you care
So
about the being?
that makes it, to me, that is trying to even it out and make it fair.
Jeremy, my question to you is this. What university in the United States of America do you know that they have a white student union?
I don't know.
That would be
You can't name one.
I'm just playing.
Right.
That would be Hampton University.
So the reason I asked that question is, so we're talking about schools here, but if I answer Aji's question is that there's a reason there's a Caribbean student union, there's a Korean student union, there's a Black student union at all these schools. You would not need that if there was true DEI going on throughout the process in terms of students being admitted. So if you talk about, let's remove the HBCU from a minute. Let's talk about like the University of Michigan, you know what I'm saying? Ann Arbor. So a school that, again, predominantly is white. Why do you need a student union that's kind of separated and, dare I say, segregated from the larger body on campus to help guide these students around? If it's so much, we all love each other and it's kumbaya and everybody's welcome. If you got a great score in GPA, why can't the white students usher around a kid from, Bermuda? Why don't they do that? What about the students that's coming in from Russia? They're not doing that. They have to have a student union at most of these universities to help these folks ingratiate themselves in their lives. A lot of times, for the duration of their 4 to 6 years of schooling, right, to get their degree, those folks become their family largely there, because the larger group of folks who have been controlling this thing for a long time are not as welcome. And that's without even talking about, affirmative action. That's just, hey, I got money to go to school and my GPA was good enough that the school said we accept you. So when you talk about then affirmative action, is nothing more insulting to me, and this isn't at you, but then somebody to say, oh, you're probably here because of, no, I'm not. I'm here just like you're here. I put in the work. In fact, I probably had to put in more work than you ever dreamed about, because when you turn around and you look at it, it's a reason that you don't see a large amount of ethnic diversity in a lot of these places. So throw corporate to a different bucket. Let's just talk about school and shit. So the problem I have with the school analogy is the fact that education was centered, whether you talk about standardized testing and all those sorts of things, to kind of separate people from the access they have versus the information they're asking you about. You can't study for a test that you don't have the proper information to prepare for. It doesn't help you that way, and you're not going to be able to pass that test. So when you talk about being able to get admission into a university, that's a whole nother level of things right there. And it's laid out that way. And it has been for a long time. And when challenged on these theories, whether it's Yale University, some of these other schools, they don't have a proper answer. They don't. They go and hide behind the legal department. Legal department puts out a statement. Statement is, oh, we support X, Y, and Z. They take a couple more pictures with the few Black kids they got on campus, and they put that on a pamphlet and that's it. But meanwhile, the same issues persist over time.
Let's go to.
You said a lot. Greg said something, and then Antoine said something.
Go ahead, Jeremy, and then I'll go to the comment after.
So I'm trying to remember everything you said, but I think you started out with when you're talking about the student body, the student unions and stuff. And
yep.
I think you were making a point about there's still a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
Yep.
I think that was your point, was just there's still a lack of it. To me, that's not a direct response to what I said about actually getting in. If the goal is to just have more diversity, then yes, have affirmative action. I think that's what it does. There's
because if you
further
don't have
questions.
affirmative action, then the people who are doing the admission are not admitting those students. They're not admitting those students. There's no different than if you work in whatever place. They are not, if you don't have representation on the other side of that table, those people are not welcoming people who don't look like them into the fold. It's just not happening.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you on that, Antoine. So to me, is that the goal? Diversity for diversity's sake? To me, that is not the primary goal that we should have. It's just these schools have diversity for diversity's sake. In fact, you kind of made a point, you've done it twice now, a point that I was going to make in a question that's coming up is who's really benefiting from affirmative action? It's these school administrators and so forth that can say, hey, look, we're diverse. We have these many people of color that are coming to our school. But in fact, a lot of times, not someone like yourself who, based off of what you said, I totally believe there's many like yourself that would get into the school without affirmative action. There's some that get in because primarily due to affirmative action. It's just true. That's what it's for. I don't even understand why we get upset about someone saying something about people getting in from affirmative action when the point of affirmative action is to allow people to get in that otherwise wouldn't be able to get into the school. Then some of those people get into school, they're not as prepared as they otherwise would be at another school. It's just a fact that actually just makes sense. If you're not, you previously didn't perform to the same level as the other average students that got into that school, why would we expect you to be as prepared? I think that kind of goes to something that you were saying about the test. You're not going to be able to take a test, so you weren't given the knowledge for it, something like that.
So ask yourself this: why? So if you take affirmative action and
hold on, Antoine, hold on. Let me go to the website real quick. Let me go to the guy on the couch and then table your answer, and then we'll go back in, sucker. All right, guy on the couch, what do you got?
All right, question number one. Do you believe that Black people should receive special accommodations, i.e. affirmative action for things such as college admission and employment opportunities? Why or why not? Merle Crump says, even though there are a lot of people that think it's unfair, that belief is usually based on an assumption that the affirmative action recipient is not qualified for the opportunity. I disagree with that assumption and feel that some action needs to be taken in an effort to create a more level playing field for qualified applicants. After all, Blacks are not just excluded by people that are racist, they're also excluded by relationships and connections. Who would you rather hire? Your good friend's qualified son or an equally qualified Black person of which you have no ties? The only way to make sure all qualified candidates are considered is to put in processes to break up some of the nepotism and exclusionary factors like racism, prejudice, etc. Back to you.
That's good. Good comment from the website. All right, Antoine, go in.
So I want to read this. So by definition, affirmative action is in the context of allocation of resources or an employment, the practice or policy of favoring individuals belonging to groups known to have been discriminated against previously. That's the larger point that I'm making. It's not that I'm not saying somebody whose grades are not great should just be given admission. It's the fact that folks whose grades are great are being discriminated against because if it was just a GPA and we were just looking at a blind system, there would be no LinkedIn, for instance. You would get no hiring manager asking, where's Jeremy's picture on a LinkedIn file? Why is it just a little random icon? People want to see what you look like for a reason. When you came to getting into school, a lot of that is the same way. If it was just based on GPA, they would not have you fill out, hey, how do you identify? They're not asking you to self-identify because they really are about, oh yeah, look who we got. No, it's like, I think we have one too many of these coming in. So now we're gonna just start randomly deciding who gets in and who doesn't. And then magically you look at your campus, if you go to a non-HBCU and you're like, wow, there's one person in the last 3 years that I've seen that looks like me in this kind of area, this kind of school of whatever business or whatever that you're involved in there. That's the larger point that I'm making. I think, and we all have varying opinions, and I definitely respect the hell out of yours, but I'm just saying that for me, I think it's important to have until there's an overhaul or a reformation of the current system that is designed to work in favor of one group of people entirely, as opposed to it being strictly skill-based. Like, it's the difference between, I'm going to say something real ignorant here, but it's like, if you and I picked up some sticks and played, if we played like Matt, but not like that, but like if we played Matt, right? So if you play simulation versus if you play competitive is just about stick skills. So if we're just talking stick skills here on getting into school or getting a job, a lot of the people that are there wouldn't be there. Greg made an excellent point. It's who you know. Because if it's performance-based, a lot of those people perform poor as hell. A lot of those people had grades or had some things that would have kept them from getting into that, university. But it's a blind eye taken to that. But those same folks want to know, hey, how do you identify? You choose to not do it. Sometimes they have ramifications. Sometimes they try to catch it down the road. Again, hey, we're sending you this form again. Are you this? Are you Pacific Islander? Are you whatever? And I think that it's important that we have to recognize that. I sit back and I even look at what's going on right now. NFL draft coming up. Every year there's a black quarterback that's like, hey, this guy's good. He's proven he's good. He's beating the best of the best. Somehow when it's draft time, here comes these questions about his work ethic. He's the last one in, the first one out. And even though there's family and friends and coaches saying, hey, that's not true. We've been around this guy for the last 4.5 years. He's never done that. Somehow there's an NFL scout that has a source that's done that. And they find a way to find a quarterback that looks like, the ones that you've seen most of your life, does not have this skill set, lost most of his games. Hey, this guy's a top 5 pick. There we go. It's the way that they want the system to go. So it's a psychological thing of, hey, if we truly are going on those stick skills, then, which I believe what you said, if we're going that way, then yes, affirmative action can go away. But there's no contingency plan in place to stop the racism that's happening. And I don't want to call it anything other than that. I don't like calling it white privilege or anything like that. No, it's racism that stops people from being able to advance ahead, because you, Jeremy, can have the same mindset, you can have the same vision as some of the folks who are given opportunities and they don't have half of the vision that you have, and that they are 2 and 3 times down the road. That's problematic as hell, because how many lifetimes do we allow to go by? Your parents' lifetime, your grandparents' lifetime, their parents and grandparents' lifetime, before we say, hey, enough is enough. We have to create something and be willing to challenge the system that's currently in place. Or if we're not going to go with that system, create an entirely new system to try to make sure people are advancing. It's it's an interesting thing. I know I said a lot this time, but yeah.
That's the problem with this show. People tend to not, they always clamp up when it's time to talk. Greg, you had your hand up.
I said, and not to mention the fact that this also has a lot to do with what happened in the past. The Black community is out millions upon millions of dollars based on the system that was in place before, where we couldn't get those jobs. We couldn't advance. We couldn't get into colleges and everything else. Like I said, this is all based on trying to balance out. So maybe a couple of people that aren't quite as qualified slip through the cracks in affirmative action and get an opportunity. That still doesn't make up for the countless numbers of Blacks in the past that were completely cut out of the system with brilliant ideas, brilliant minds, more than qualified, smartest person in the room, and still didn't get a chance. That's what this is trying to make up for. So if you're going by a clean slate, if everything was even from the beginning and we had affirmative action, I'm with you 100%, Jeremy. But because of what happened in the past, you know what I'm saying? We have to change it for the future. There has to be more of, it's a shame that we have to legislate opportunity, because if we don't, we won't get it. And that's the problem. And like I said, maybe it to a small degree that isn't fair. However, it has never been fair for us here. And now that we've got fair going for us for 5 minutes, people are upset. And I disagree with it. I disagree with it 100%. I'll say this for the white people that are upset about this. If you are upset about it, don't look at me like I'm the problem. Talk to your grandparents. They're the ones that did not make things fair, that have ultimately made your life a smidge harder. And by a smidge, I mean, you might not get a full scholarship. You might just get a partial. So it's not my fault. This is your grandparents' fault. Don't look at me like I'm the bad guy. Your grandparents ruined it for you.
There will be no grandparent slander going on in this table today. No, Jeremy, go ahead. Last word on this one.
So I think we definitely disagree. So I get everything you said, Greg, everything you said, Antoine. You made some good points, but I think the main disagreement is this whole idea that, well, things weren't fair in the past, so affirmative action is making things fair now, or will eventually make things fair. One, they'll never be able to give us an entitlement that matches the suffering that we had in the past. I didn't make that up. That's actually from another writer, but I totally agree with it.
Agree.
Two,
Agree as well.
two, it actually hurts us. To me, affirmative action is a crutch. It is a crutch. Now we're saying, or at least you all saying, and many do, it's a crutch that we deserve because we were handicapped from the past.
Yeah.
And we definitely were handicapped in the past. And it carries into the present day. But if we keep the crutch, will we ever be able to walk without it? What is there to lead you to believe, based off of all the history now, from when affirmative action started back in the 60s to today, that we're any closer to not needing affirmative action? Don't we actually want to be at a point where we don't need race in order for us to get into these different institutions and these businesses and so on and so forth? I thought that was the goal. Instead, if we're always, hold on, if we're always need the beneficence of
Benevolence.
white benevolence.
Benevolence. Yeah.
But then,
Got it.
okay,
It's a hard word.
so if we're always relying on, if we're always going to rely on white people and larger society to give us this entitlement, we're always going to be in a weaker position. Always. I don't want us to be in that position. That's the weak position. You said that, well, we haven't been given an opportunity. I think in this day and age, we can create opportunities. It may not look like us going working for someone else and hoping that they allow us to climb up the corporate ladder or let us go to the best schools. It may be something different. But as long as we're relying on something like affirmative action, we're not going to get from out of that rock, from under that rock. Go ahead.
Greg, I have a real hesitancy to let you go because I wanted to move on.
I'm not gonna go too long.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I hear what you're saying, but you know what that takes? It takes time. Okay. Affirmative action just started. All right. Once this goes on, hold on. Once this goes on for a while, hopefully the goal is for things to start balancing out to the point where we won't need it. But in order to get
it's not balancing out yet.
Dude, we were put down for 250 years. It's been about 45 years for affirmative action. It's not going to balance out overnight. These things take time. That's all I'm saying. But in order to even get to that spot, we have to take steps to get there. That's all. And that's all this is. I'm not saying this should be the norm for the next 1,000 years. Nobody wants that. You know what I'm saying? But there has to be a way to get into the door so we can get into the position where we don't need it. That's what I'm saying. And this is part of the opportunity to get into the door, to get things to change enough where we won't need it anymore.
Hey, we actually have a comment from Facebook on this for our Facebook Live from Dion Smith. I hope you shout out to Dion. Great discussion. I would add that college admission is biased as the entire education system is biased to white advancement. For instance, Black and brown youth are less likely to be placed on or in advanced classes. As such, people of color are less likely to perform as well on the standardized instrument, which are normed or on whites, or I guess for whites. To create equity, affirmative action is necessary until the gatekeeping is more equitable. There is a need for blind evaluation process. With that, I'm going to go ahead and plug the website really quick, which, God help us, hopefully is working for everybody, www.blackadvancement.com. When you are there, you have a chance to go to our research tab. Under this research tab, you get a chance to go through several different articles that we try to take them from several different angles so people can better formulate their arguments. There's a topics tab. The topics tab is basically where we come up with some of our topics. These are usually evergreen topics, stuff that you could talk about now, and unfortunately you could have talked about 50 years ago, to some of our people's point. Also, you could go to the events tab. For instance, we had an event yesterday. Usually, sometimes this is updated on time, sometimes it's not. But for instance, we had an event yesterday that had a financial seminar that was involved in it. If you wanted to know about that ahead of time, outside of our advertisements, you could have also found out about it through Black Advancement's events tab. And lastly, the in history section, where we basically focus on parts in history that you may not have learned in school and that you would find interesting. So, great debate so far, everybody. On to question number 2. Do you feel the bootstraps narrative is fair or unfair, specifically when applied to Black people? And I am going to let Jeremy go first on this one. Jeremy, go ahead.
Is life fair? I think that's no, seriously. It's life fair. I think that we get hung up on stuff being fair for us, and I think the question really is there enough opportunity for us to do for ourselves? And I would say yes. Going off of the history of this country and really the world, really, because things have never been totally fair for anyone individually, but especially minority groups in any country. So the real question is, we can always, if we always say, well, it's not fair, well then you're right. It's not totally perfect for us, but is there enough opportunity for us to do for ourselves and that we should expect of ourselves to be able to do well without special benefits being given to us by people that aren't us? I would say yes, there's enough opportunity for that, and we should expect it for ourselves. Otherwise, again, we're going to be relying on somebody else to be giving us some type of crutch.
All right, and Antoine.
Yeah, so I don't feel it's fair, and I feel that a lot of times that the people who are making a statement about pull yourself up by the bootstraps are the very people who've benefited from being pulled up by things not known as their bootstraps. So it's like, if you have been given assistance, or an assistance can come in many different forms, right? Who you know is kind of what gets you a lot of different places. Access is also something that gets you, a lot of different places, because if you don't have access to certain resources, you're not ever going to be able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I do, on one half of that, agree with Jeremy that, yeah, it's fair in this day and age from a perspective that we live in a different world than what one would consider the 60s, the 50s, and 40s, and so on and so forth. However, the unfairness is still equally weighted the same. You don't have access quite to everything that you would need to fully pull yourself up by the bootstraps, because there's plenty of non-lazy people out there. There are plenty of people who are fully motivated and kind of looking to enact their vision, and they don't have access to those resources to do so. So that's my short way of saying that, yeah, I don't think it's fair, but there's a place where they judge pigs. You got to get out there and get it done one way or another. It's what it is.
Great.
Yeah, their narrative when it comes to that pull yourself up by the bootstrap stuff is kind of ridiculous. Realizing that they've had boots since the beginning of this country. We just got boots in the 60s. Okay. We don't even got the straps for the boots yet. We just put boots on, and they're not even the good boots. All right. We got honchos, they got Timberlands.
I knew you were going to say honchos. I knew you were going to say honchos.
Okay. Like I said, all of these things, people, the thing that I don't understand when it comes to topics like these is no one is understanding the use of time. All of these things take time, okay? You want Black people to get freed from slavery, get out of Jim Crow 50 years ago?
Maybe 60, give or take.
Okay, fair enough. 60 years ago, and in 60 years, you want us to be at the same marching pace as you, who has been free the entire time and had all the benefits of everything that this country has to offer. These things are going to take time. Now, if you would like to help us, but help us get to where you're at, all across the board, then help us. But don't try and hold us down and then complain about why aren't we doing better while we're holding you down. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense at all. So do we need to get our stuff together? In certain areas and aspects, of course we do. Everyone needs to do a little bit better. However, don't expect better to happen overnight, okay? Either help out or shut up and get out the way. Those are the only options that you have in this if you want things to get right. You can't expect people to get right while holding them down and then complain about why aren't you doing things while we're holding you down. It just doesn't make sense to me. So the complaints are just ridiculous. All right,
Yep.
I'm done.
To the point of affirmative action is removing affirmative action holding us down.
Is removing it
by not affirmatively doing something?
Yes. Yes.
Because the reason I asked is because you said either help us or get out of the way. So I would think that removing affirmative action is just getting out of the way, but you're saying it's actually holding you down. It's affirmatively hurting someone by not giving them a benefit.
So if you don't give the benefit,
you're saying
you don't have the.
That's what you're saying. That's what it sounds like Greg is saying. If you don't give someone a leg up based off of the race, then you're actually hurting them.
Yes. In this case, yes. Because you've had a leg up the entire time. We're literally hundreds of years behind. Literally. And
will we ever be so? Slavery happened, Jim Crow happened, and a number of other things happened. Can't ever change it.
Yes.
Will we ever be able to not point to that for any gaps? Because since that happened, we can always use that and say, hey, well, this happened to us. Don't expect us to be able to play on the even playing field. So should we always be able to use that?
Once again, you missed my whole point about time.
No, I got that. I got that. I totally got it.
Take time, okay? We're gonna get there, but don't look at me like I'm crazy because we're not there now.
Mm-hmm. Are we getting there though? But are we getting there though? It's a relevant question because I'm seeing all sorts of programs. I'm seeing all sorts of programs that purport to support Black people that are talking about all these gaps that have widened over the years with these policies in place. So
what kind of gaps? If you don't mind being specific for me.
Education gap, score gap, wealth gap, income gap.
So wealth and income, right? Let's talk about something we can talk about there since money is memory. Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna make this real quick. But those same gaps have happened, and not just the Blacks, they have happened in America, period. You know what I'm saying? They've happened to poor whites too, and whites in certain areas. Mm-hmm. So these gaps are all the same. You know what I'm saying?
So there's a factor other than race at play?
You said what?
So there's a factor other than race at play?
Of course
that may be more relevant. That might be actually more relevant.
But here's the thing about it. Not only is race at play, see, it's a double-edged sword for Blacks. It's race and wealth. White people just got to deal with the wealth. Black people have to deal with the race and wealth.
What do Asian people have to deal with?
The same. But they're doing
better. But they're doing better than whites.
Hold on, let me break it down though.
Says who?
I'm just going off of the number. I'm going off of the wealth.
No, numbers on what number? Cite your sources here. Help me out. What number?
Wait, let me cover the Asian thing. Okay, they come here as immigrants. They get a whole bunch of programs to help them out. They don't have a history nearly as turbulent as ours in this country, and they have their own communities which have are benefited by the government that they flushed money into. Okay, they're flushing money into their communities and helping them out. In a lot of incidents.
The U.S. government is flushing the Asian community with money?
Let me help him out a little bit. I think what he's trying to say is that, for instance, right, if you have the an immigrant that comes in and they can open up a shop. You know how it's kind of easier for them to open up shops and stuff like that. They're given assistance for that. Second generations and third generations and so forth, they benefit off of that. Like, whereas we were brought in as slaves, we don't get no shops. They kept us from money a lot of times and from loans a lot of times. And they can still do that even to this day, as far as keeping us from better loans and better. I digress. I don't mean to be impartial. I'm trying to be impartial here.
No, but that's an excellent point. So my question to you, Jeremy, because it goes back to what I wanted to say about money. So let's remove affirmative action from the equation. From the time that slavery ended, where do you believe we as Black people would be if you don't have any type of affirmative action? Being that it's only about 50, 60 years in, we've established that. We know what affirmative action is designed to do. We also see how it's benefiting certain areas other than the folks it was designed to help. Take me through, what is your vision for that then? Are you saying that Black people we would be ahead of the curve, that we would be, the gap would be tighter? I mean, what are you saying with that? Because what I gather from what you're saying is that essentially we don't need affirmative action, yet even with affirmative action, we're behind in these key areas. So whether it's financials, whether it's, you're talking about wealth, whether you're talking about certain things in education, there has to be a reason for that. It's not because we like smart people. I can assure you of that.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me that, man. I totally I totally believe that. When I say that I'm not supporting affirmative action and we're having lower scores and stuff, it's not because I don't think our people are incredibly intelligent and talented. Actually, it's the opposite. We're incredibly intelligent and talented. We don't need this, but in fact, because it's in place, we're not necessarily incentivized to perform at the same level as others. If we actually had to get the same scores in order to get into a Harvard or a Princeton and so forth, then we really would have to. If the numbers would be lower, this is my opinion, if the numbers were actually abysmally low because there were no affirmative action, it would be more incentive for us to work even harder. We had a conversation before about how the schools are and some of the approach towards education for some of the Black community. The first time that I was in one of these.
It was the integration one. It was the integration talk.
Yeah,
One,
and I think it may have taken place after the episode was over. But there was definitely disagreement. But I felt that a substantial portion of our people don't treat education as seriously as we could. I think that if we didn't have some of these things, we just find other ways that would actually be more focused on what we can do to achieve for ourselves, as opposed to another group trying to have the image of being free of racism. The image of being free of racism was gets you those DEI type programs and stuff like that. But it's not really focused on us, our entire community, doing as well as possible. I can't give you an exact number. Personally, I don't focus so much on, I don't think the focus really should be on the gap between Black and white. I don't look at white people as the standard of anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because you're saying there's gap. And so that's what I was trying to see where you were going with that, because I don't use a white person as a standard or a yardstick of excellence in my book. I'm looking at it from, go ahead. I'm giving an example.
Okay, fine.
I came over from high school, right, in Germany, right, and I could have graduated them, but they were 2 years behind the curriculum that I had there. They were 4 years behind the curriculum I had when I first moved to Germany and was going to a German-only high school. Okay, so and the school I went to wasn't a Black school. It wasn't a school that would be predominantly in that regard. So our education system, if you want to talk about certain other folks being ahead, it's the education system as a whole that could use an overhaul. It's not so much anything that affirmative action is doing or not doing there, because there are smart Black kids there. There are Black kids who could be doing better. There are smart white kids there. There are white kids who could be doing better, and so on and so forth down the pendulum scale. What I'm saying and challenging you on is the aspect that if we're talking about purely affirmative action, the opportunity to patch up, because that's all it would be doing. Greg made an excellent point, whether he knew it or not, about time. It takes a shitload of time for this to actually get going and warp up this machine for that whole gap to fully close. And by the time that happens, will it ever happen? We don't know, because the same time you have folks trying to make progress with something like an affirmative action, You have people that are having things in place, obstacles. Let me just be a little more specific to kind of, knock that off as balance, if you will, to make sure that, okay, because you're getting here, here's the other resources we're moving over here. The yardstick is moving down the line. You're not able to get the same benefits as folks who are there getting monetary benefits to start their businesses, to, start up their community centers, to start up whatever they are looking to start up that would allow their community to thrive. And I'm saying that to keep from getting into the weeds. I have more specific examples, but it's just a matter of, for the time today, we know that resources being allocated in certain areas will always help a certain group. And we lack those resources.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ach, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, man. I'm going to cut in real quick, give 2 more comments from people watching. Asians got reparations when the war, when they were placed in American camps during WW2, which reminds me we will have a session on reparations later down the line. And another comment, Blacks are number 1 on every negative indicator: lowest graduation rates, lowest health outcomes, incarceration rates, etc. It's intentional, not an accident. And with that, I will send it to the guy on the couch for a comment from the website. Guy, what you got?
All right, question number 2. Do you feel the bootstraps narrative is fair or unfair, specifically when applied to Black people? Michelle says, I think applying yourself and working your way out of poverty is, of course, something that is possible to accomplish in this country. However, the idea that you'll be fine if that's all you do is a myth. There are a lot of people who believe that this country operates on a pure and infallible meritocracy, and that if you don't get ahead, it's because you must be doing something wrong. This is naive and denies that discrimination in all areas of life is still a very real and pervasive problem in America, because of which highly educated, qualified individuals working hard to achieve the American dream can still be arrested or killed for being in the quote unquote wrong neighborhood, or shopping in the quote unquote wrong stores, or trying to exercise or drive their new car, or even standing on the sidewalk. Back to you.
Wow, that went darker than I thought it would at the end there. Any comments based off of the comments from Michelle? Shout out to Michelle, great comment, by the way.
Yup, +1 of that. And I think that even speaks to the greater bias that does exist, because you've never heard of cops, just to pull onto the dark side for 2 seconds, right? Killing unarmed white kids across this country at a rampant rate. It's only been unarmed Black kids for the high percentage rate. That's not accidental. When you look at what it takes to become a cop, you have a tougher time trying to Jeremy's point, get into some of these schools, right? So why are we not holding everything across the board accountable in the same way? If you're going to talk about ethics and standards. So if you're talking about standards and bootstraps and being able to pull yourself up, you know damn well if you haven't given the benefits, or if Black people haven't been given reparations, right, on any level, how are you supposed to succeed at the same level that they're saying, hey, well, why aren't you here? You know why I'm not there. You know why I'm here, but you're not giving me what I need to get ahead. And to Greg's point, at this point in 2021, just get out the way. Because if you're going, and I don't think that removing affirmative action is getting out the way. Affirmative action is meant to help. Is it meant to be there forever? No. But for this point in time, until there's a different system in place that's completely free of bias, as you heard me allude to earlier, if we're not intending to be biased, we don't need to see you. Let's just look at numbers. Let's just talk math at that point. And we'll all become mathematical geniuses, because we'll look at it from a perspective of we're just dealing in numbers. That's a very finite thing. But if you want to talk about, oh, how does Jeremy look? Or why are all these bills passing now where Black women and men can wear the hair that they want in the workplace? The hair is not stopping you from moving a spreadsheet or teaching a class or anything. You should have never had to pass that. It's because the folks who are in charge of giving you the information and the resources to be able to be successful in those environments, they have bias. They have bias that are not helping you to, get ahead. That is very important.
I'm just going to cut in because I know that we've had a very robust discussion and the time is starting to kind of get away from us. So I'll just butt in with the website plug, which is www.blackadvancement.com. While you're there, you can go to our debates tab, where you can see all of these great fellas in different debates, as long with this dirtbag right here, who's usually moderating the debates on all the topics that we've done. One of the things we love to do at Black Advancement Incorporated is to promote Black-owned businesses. The one that we want to recommend today is a very dear friend of ours from Odd Ninja Media. They just came out with their first Black comic book called Jericho Cutter. If you have the opportunity to go cop that. Go to the website. It is a lot of cool, not only apparel and materials, but the comic book itself is dope. I got the first one, and I plan on making a boatload of money off of them. Thank you, Jason. Anyway, last but not least, we're going to go to our book of the month, which is something that we also do every month here at the Black Advancement. This book is not biased at all when it comes to this topic, and that book is entitled "When Affirmative Action Was White: An Untold History of Racial Inequality in the 20th Century America" by Ira Katznelson, I think is how you pronounce his last name. So now we're going to the final question, and you know what we do in this position. We can anybody can go in as soon as they hear the question. Who do you believe benefits the most from affirmative action, and why?
Okay, then I guess I'll start. Based on the numbers, like I said, white women are the ones that benefit the most from affirmative action. And the reason why that is because women are another group of people that are held back in this country. And, you know, if you're going to have someone in there that you feel doesn't belong, might as well be someone that looks like you, is the way that this thing has been pretty much going out. So, I mean, you're more comfortable with Susan than Tyrone in these offices. So that's why they've been benefiting more based off of that. And, you know, it's one of those things you want to work with who you're comfortable with. So I think that's the reason behind white women being number one on these on the affirmative action chart, so to speak. So it's not a slight against white women. It's just, you know, it's just what it is. And it's not a slight against women at all. Like I said, it's another group of oppressed people in this country. Not nearly as oppressed as us, but oppressed nonetheless. So I think that's the reasoning behind it. And why
I'm going to second that. And it's definitely white women. There's a number of studies out there that highlight that. Feel free to do your Googles. Why that is, I'm going to keep it short. Greg made the point already. People work with who they're comfortable with. And that's just simply what it is. There's no two ways about that. How do we beat that and change it where you would have affirmative action kind of benefit the folks it was meant to serve? Is there just needs to be more transparency. And until you have proper representation, you won't have transparency. You'll have more smoke and mirrors. Remove the smoke and mirrors and you'll get a raw reality that will kind of, you know, let you know exactly what it is. If you pay attention to your surroundings and to what's going on, you'll know what it is already. And you just have to be willing to part ways with your fantasy of what the world is versus what it actually is, what actually has been transpiring for years, and then be prepared to enact change in a way that would benefit you and your community. I think people, and I'm going to say this, don't depend on affirmative action, right? So it's great, and it's something that is needed, and I find it is necessary. That's my point, and that's my opinion. But I do believe that that shouldn't stop you from working hard and smarter and finding more innovative ways to get to the future that you want to see.
So I'm gonna go in a little different direction with it with my answer. I think that affirmative action most benefits white people, white corporations, going back to something that Antoine said earlier, white institutions like schools. There's this author that I like named Shelby Steele, and he's written a lot about how after the 1960s, after the civil rights movement, America essentially admitted its guilt in being racially oppressive and that it had not lived up to its ideals. Ever since that moment, white America has been trying to prove its racial innocence. It's not been a true concern for Black people's development as opposed to being more so concerned with maintaining their moral authority. So what they've done is erected an iconography of racial innocence, one of them being affirmative action. Affirmative action allows them to say, hey, we have so this many Black people in our institution, in our school, in our um, business, so on and so forth. We're not racist. We can maintain our moral authority and then enact whatever other policies that we wish to and go about business as usual. Meantime, we still, the schools are not, the kids prior to getting to college are not necessarily being served as well as they otherwise or as they should be in order to actually have the grades in order to get into these elite institutions, in order to be prepared for these type of jobs. Affirmative action just gives the veneer of racial innocence for this country. Affirmative action hurts us in some ways. I totally acknowledge the points that for uh, some Black people, it does help us. But if we're not actually performing to the level that we need to in today's economy and the shifting world, we're still falling behind. There's no information, there's no data coming out saying that affirmative action is actually working in developing our people. So in this world that's becoming more driven by technology and moving away from the traditional type of jobs that we used to have in the traditional functions of corporations, we're falling behind, or at least we're not moving ahead like we should. Meantime, white America can still use these type of policies like affirmative action to say, hey, look, we're not guilty. We're not racist. We help Black people out. Look how many people we let in. Yeah, maybe their scores weren't as good. Maybe they go to some of these schools intending to major in the STEM field, but since they weren't actually quite as prepared as the rest of the student body, they went into another field that was a soft science, if you will, and Black people have less people that are in the hard sciences and the tech fields. Yeah, that might hurt them, but look, we're not racist.
Interesting perspective. I'm gonna go to the website. Guy on the couch, what you got, man?
All right, question number 3. Who do you believe benefits the most from affirmative action and why? Rob says it is mutually beneficial. Majority-run businesses and schools are exposed to cultures they would not otherwise be and get to know them and to reduce their fear of the unknown. Minorities win because they get opportunities systemic and individual racism might prevent them from getting otherwise. And we learn about other races and cultures and reduce our fear of the unknown. Back to you.
Great. I will say, like, as far as like all of the different opinions go, I think this has been a very good discussion. Especially that's an interesting. Jeremy, I want the name of that book because that could very well become the book of the month for a month. But yeah, no, but those are all very good perspectives. If I could be so bold as to just offer something before I guess we can call it a show. For the people who've had the benefit of going to the website when it's been working this week, that's another story for another time. The graphic that is on there for affirmative action is an old like cartoon clipping. It's one of those, you know how they used to have the news ones, kind of like the Boondocks where they had like the news clipping of it. And on there it has like 4 or 5 different people going to the school. Well, it's got like 5 or 6 people going to the school. It has one where it's got like a person saying, "Oh, this is a legacy person, they got in. This is an athlete, they got in. This is a a person who knows someone in the school, they got in." And it goes down the road. And then it has another person who's a minority, and it says they got in. And then off to the side, it has a person pointing at the minority of all the people who are there, and he goes, "That's not fair." So that's kind of, I'm just gonna leave it at that. You guys take from that what you want, and I'm gonna go ahead and plug the website, which is www.blackadvancement.com. While you're there, we have a ton of cool stuff that you can go and check out outside of our debates and roundtables. You can also catch us as well-rounded people as we are. We have other things that we do, other ventures that we do that we highlight on the website. One of the things that you can go to is the Female Voice, which is Black women talking about Black female issues, for lack of a better way of saying it. Basically grown woman issues pretty much is what they concentrate on. It's a good show, you should check it out. Hollywood, which has a bunch of riotous, ridiculous people on there. I'm not gonna say who's on there, Antoine and Greg. So, but there's a bunch of different people on there. So it's fun. It's a fun loving show. It's basically just about people's love for movies coming up. And the last one is the obnoxious synopsis. It's basically about our perspectives on some of the news that's happened throughout the week. While you're also on the website, you can go to the donations tab. We are a nonprofit after all. It will be, the Begathon is coming soon. So you guys be prepared for the Begathon, which will roll from about May 20th through Juneteenth. So you guys be prepared for that. Prepared to give us all of your money. No, I'm just playing. Just, whatever you can donate. Another thing that we love to do at the website is promote Black people you should know. The one that I want to promote for this particular roundtable is William Green. He was born in 1864 through 1942. Green is the first meteorologist and the first Black station chief in the Signals Corps for the military. So that was his shining moment. Shout out to him and his ancestors. And last but definitely not least is our solutions section. Within our solutions section, you will find what the Black advancement is all about, which is basically combating problems within the Black community through action and dialogue. Like we said, this is the dialogue part. The solutions are the action part. One of the perfect examples of the solutions is the thing that we did yesterday with the financial seminar. It's a book that we come out with called The Credit Commandments. We're going to actually be working on an update for that for volume 4. So if you get a chance to, and once it comes out, you should check it out. It might help you out. All that being said, thanks everybody for watching. We really enjoyed the feedback on Facebook Live. We appreciate that. People who've been commenting on the website, we appreciate that. All the panelists, we appreciate y'all. Thank you to everybody. Oh, if you're on Facebook, check us out at The Black Advancement. On Twitter, it's at Black Advancement BLK. Someone took the color. I digress. On IG, it's The Black Advancement as well. Or you can go to our website, which again is www.blackadvancement.com. Until next time, Black people, peace and advance. Shout out to Hampton University. You know what it is. Does anyone else have any shout outs?
McDowell's.
I don't agree with that. All right, I'm stopping the recording.